Share my screen. I hope that's clear to everyone. If someone could,
yeah, that's good, Dave.
Yeah.
That
Very good. Okay, so up until very recently, I was the account director for Amey and Sheffield and Streets Ahead contract. I've only just recently left, though staying on a freelance consultancy basis just to support Amey and the Street Tree partnership that we have in just concluding the strategy and a few of the action and outcomes that we're looking to deliver. Oh, one of my graphics hasn't appeared for some reason. I apologise. I don't know why that is. Let me see if I can stop sharing the screen. Maybe you can see it. Yeah, I think you can see it better there, can't you? So I'll leave it. Can everyone see that? Is that image okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So very similar to the Birmingham contract that Amey had, the PFI. Sheffield started in 2012 and concludes in 2037. The difference for the Sheffield PFI is that we're responsible for all the assets fence to fence. So not only the trees and the grass, but also the street cleansing, the litter bins, as well as the roads, the street lights, bridges and structures, and the traditional highway assets and drainage you'd expect. So everything is Amey's responsibility up until 2037. So that's quite a large and fundamental change from Birmingham, because obviously the grounds maintenance and street cleansing is the responsibility of the council and other providers in the city. So whenever you're on the streets of Sheffield, everything on it is Amey's responsibility. So it makes it a little bit easier when it comes to new trees and their maintenance, making sure that grounds maintenance teams don't mow them off or damage them. And obviously when we come to weed control and everything else, that it's appropriate as well, and we are considerate to the trees. And I just wanted to give you a bit of an overview of just some of the achievements of the contract to date, because obviously in Sheffield we concluded the CapEx programme, the investment in the highways and street lighting in 2018, and actually Sheffield is had 66,000 streetlights replaced, all with an LED solution. So I think it was the biggest LED rollout outside Chicago in the world. So it was a fantastic project to be involved in. And you can see there, 1,800 miles of footways surfaced, over 800 miles of footways. But some of the critical things that we also do is involve the wider public and communities. So we've got over 3,000 supported litter picking groups across the city as well. And, obviously we've now got the Street Tree Warden programme, which is 47 wardens. And we've, obviously because we're responsible for the street cleansing as well, we deal with over 140,000 requests around litter and fly tip and everything else. But we've also tried to work very hard with the community in schools. So we do have an education officer in Sheffield and a communities officer as well. So we engage with schools, Girl Guides in terms of the competing for the Amey Challenge Cup, which is about trying to encourage young ladies into engineering. And we've had workshops for 63,000 pupils to date, looking at litter and trying to, I think our aim is to educate one generation to stop dropping litter, which is quite an ambitious target, but it's a target that the contract set itself. And obviously across Amey, all our staff are involved in community days and supporting community projects, and we delivered over 700 volunteer days to date. I'm not here to sell or preach the good word of Amey. It was just to give you a good idea of Sheffield and some of the differences really between the Sheffield contract and the Birmingham contract. I think anyone who knows anything about Sheffield and probably Google Sheffield will come across articles and snippets similar to this. So we started on the programme of tree replacements in 2012 when the contract went live. First few years wasn't, there was some issues, but really from 2015 up until 2018, residents were really challenging the programme, the speed of the programme, because we were trying to deliver a capital investment programme in 5 years, and obviously that tree replacement program at the same time. I think it had been spread over the 25 years. It perhaps wouldn't have been as controversial as it was. So lots of controversy. I don't want to get into all the detail of the dispute. You know, there are lots and lots of very passionate people looking out for their own neighbourhoods and communities and looking to retain the trees wherever possible. And that resulted in 2018 some mediated talks with the Bishop of Sheffield, bringing together Sheffield City Council, Amey and Stag. And Stag is Sheffield Tree Action Group. It's a collective of lots of different groups across Sheffield who are interested in trees and protecting them in their communities. So Stag, if you like, was the umbrella organisation. And following those talks, which were very fruitful, in 2019, we started doing joint inspections between Amey and Stag on the trees causing damage on the footways and carriageways. So at the end of the core investment period, that first 5 years, we had something around 300 trees that were left over that Amey weren't able to replace because of the dispute. And instead of trying to charge on ahead, we worked very close to a Stag. We went out and did joint inspections on the curb displacement, the damage on the footways that the trees were causing in third-party properties and others, and looked to try and identify some simple solutions that could be implemented. The relationship between Stag and Amey on site was very, very good. And on a large number of streets, we were able to find alternatives. So in some areas, we put very thin curbs in, or edgings for curbing, just to try and meet the contract requirements, put the protection in on the highway that was required, knowing that some of these solutions will be short term. But you know, Amey made a commitment that we will go back and carry any maintenance required and ensure that those solutions were kept for as long as possible before we had to look and revisit any tree replacements. And in 2019, the Street Tree Partnership was formed under the chair of Liz Bollard, who's the CEO of the Sheffield and Rotherham Wildlife Trust. And that involved members from Sheffield City Council, myself, from Amey, and one of our tree inspectors, a couple of members from Stag, the Woodland Trusts were involved, and we also had another colleague, head of Leeds City Council, join us as an impartial observer, if you like, and supporting us as well to make sure that what we wanted to deliver was a working strategy that was exemplary, but also fit for the city as well, that we would be able to deliver. So in 2020, we actually launched the working strategy that was sent out for consultation in March 2020. And since then, since the feedback came in September, the partnership's been working very hard to get this strategy finished. I think we're now at the point of a final draft, which will hopefully be signed off next week when we will meet. And that will then shortly then be going to Cabinet in the city for sign off. And then the partnership really then moves in. The remainder of this year is into a delivery group, looking at the outcomes that we've got and how we're going to deliver them. So there are 6 key outcomes within the strategy that we've developed. So sustainability and carefully managing our street trees in accordance with best practice. So Sheffield has been working with PEFC. PEFC are world renowned and manage, if you like, and accredit the Aqua scheme in the forestry environment. So what we're looking to do is get accreditation for the management of street trees. At the moment, as a contractor or consultants in arboriculture, you can get accreditation for the Arbor Association. But what you can't get is accredited management of your street trees or your urban street stock. And we are only focusing as a partnership on street trees. We're not looking at parks and woodlands or third-party trees. The whole group is focused purely on the street tree, which is different to yourselves. I understand that you're looking at all trees, regardless of land ownership. So yeah, that may develop in the future, but at the moment under Amey's contract is purely looking at the street trees. So looking at sustainability, so what do we need to do in terms of making sure we are delivering the best practice? So we've documented all that in the strategy and the appendices, and there's a clear action plan that we're working through at the moment. The second outcome was to ensure that we're more resilient. I don't know if that was a question or... But
just a copy before I do the bathrooms. Ooh, is it gone?
sorry, I can hear someone in the background. I don't know if they're asking a question or grab you a brew. But if you do want to ask a question, just drop it in the chat. So yeah, outcome 2 was looking at more resilience, the species and the stock that we're looking to plant. The third was increasing the value and benefits of our street trees. So you'll see in the working strategy and the future strategy, there's a lot of data in there that came from tree economics around the carbon benefits of the trees, the caveat valuation of the trees across Sheffield. There's some really interesting facts if you're interested in looking at those and how we've calculated them through iTree Eco. And then the fourth one was contributing to a more equal distribution of the urban forest. So you can see a huge population of trees around the southwest of Sheffield, but very little in the north. So we'll look at that, look at how we might promote well-being and health across that as well, and looking at urban deprivation and how that's spread across the city and how trees might be able to impact on that. But critically in some of those areas, it's about getting that community involvement. Otherwise, the trees will be overrun by verge parking and damage. So we want to try and avoid that. The fifth one was about increasing tree canopy cover. So critically about planting the right tree as well. Obviously, lots of people talk about saplings and lollipops and everything else on the urban streets. You know, it is a difficult environment for any tree to successfully establish, but it's trying to get the biggest tree in you can get. And that's what we're looking at. And that's really what the partnership is there to challenge Amey and its replacement programme and the authority as well, to make sure that we are approving the right tree for the right location. And obviously outcome 6 was about involving the community and caring and valuing for the street trees. So outcome 6 was really what drives the street warden programme. So we have recruited 40 volunteer street wardens. It went live on the 4th of January. We have 3 tree inspectors that are geographically split across the city, and the street tree wardens report into, if you like, the tree inspectors. So building that relationship, building that trust and knowledge of the streets and the trees. We provided them all the geographical locations of all the trees in the streets, and we've tried to divvy up, if you like, geographical locations. And really it's about the individual street wardens, what they're comfortable doing, the area that they want, and they can have as much as they like. To be fair, we welcome any support and any sort of passive observation of any of the trees. So they're a great asset to us, and it's almost taking that passion from the protest that we saw in the first few years now and really taking it to the good and looking at how we develop as a great relationship going forward and what else we can do as a partnership. So for us, the tree warden role is about championing our local trees, so and educating. And we do have some war memorial streets, which obviously featured previously in the press. So we want to understand the heritage of the streets. A lot of this is not documented. So if we can get some of this documented and into our management plan and records, it'd be greater understanding for our tree inspectors in future and any maintenance requirements. Obviously about monitoring our tree health, all our tree inspectors are doing surveys every 3 to 5 years, but some trees are rapidly declining in certain areas and certain species. You know, we see a lot of phytophthora currently on our lime trees around the city, which is of concern. We're seeing ash dieback now, and I'm not going to talk too much about that, but obviously Nathan will pick that up shortly. We have, I think, 2,500 ash we're currently monitoring for ash dieback at the moment, and we're looking at our tree wardens as well to help us with that monitoring this spring. And obviously, if we're looking for the tree wardens really to visit the street trees at least twice a year. They have a direct dial number into our operational control room, so if they see anything that's hazardous or they will consider putting people at risk or danger, they can immediately ring that through. And because they're a tree warden, we respond very quickly and make sure the appropriate team is sent out immediately to deal with those issues. Otherwise, they do have direct email addresses with our tree inspectors and a collective email, which we try and keep people updated. I do like the format here today, where you bring everyone together, getting area updates, a little quiz, and I think that's something I'll obviously take away today that I can share with them as well. So obviously what we hope is our tree wardens will be supporting looking the care for the trees. As we said, we do have Similar to yourselves in urban environments, you do get damage to young trees from vandalism and other parties. So Verge Park is a major issue in Sheffield, and the lack of park at the moment. It's about bringing like-minded people together to look at training and sharing ideas. Obviously, we do have a community lead, and she's coordinating our tree wardens, and we have a lot of people there who really do want to spend time, look at the trees, supporting our education officer potentially as well, and seeing what they can do, and tying in those links with parks and other landowners around Sheffield. We are looking for our tree wardens to obviously support us in coordinating of watering of young trees as well, and perhaps even some of the weed control as well where we can. We do have a lot of residents who are quite keen to mow their own verges, so we do want to make sure we educate them as well not to damage any young trees planted. And just supporting the partnership as well and tree-related products. You know, you spoke, Tanya, about an urban tree festival. We have similar events in Sheffield, and in National Tree Week, we did plant a couple of trees with the support of tree wardens as well. So we're looking to continue doing that. As you said, we've only been live since the 4th of January. We've had a couple of conversations with Mac and Tonya, and it's been great because, you know, anything we can share that you're doing that we can take into Sheffield will be fantastic, and there's some good learning, and hopefully we can share some of our learning with you. One of the other outcomes as well, where we're looking for our tree wardens to be involved, is look at a community tree funding programme as well. This is where residents or the wider community can look at supporting tree planting, increasing the tree canopy in the streets. Obviously, similar to the Birmingham contract now run by Kia, our contract is a 1-for-1 replacement. So the canopy will never get greater. I mean, in fairness, it's likely to shrink a little bit if you start taking out mature trees and replacing them with younger ones. But so what we're looking to do is increase the tree numbers on the verges and in the streets through some community funding. The aim of the community fund will be that the community, if you like, establish that tree in the first 3 years. So Amey will do the initial inspections to make sure the location is suitable, the species is suitable, and we will plant the tree. Funded by the authority through the City Council, and there'll be a licensing agreement with the City Council in place with the resident and the community. So the community will be responsible for maintaining and establishing that tree in the first 3 years, because we want that ownership in the community. And Amey will then take that tree on and ensure it survives thereafter, after year 3, and replace any that fail after year 3. But should it fail in the first 3 years, either the community replace it. If it's down to poor planting practice or poor nursery stock, then obviously Amey will replace it. But the aim is to really try and get the community to own the tree, maintain it, and ensure it thrives in its environment. So in that first application, what we're saying to residents in the community is, please, you know, provide us some evidence the wider community supports, you know, that tree being planted there, or increasing the trees along that street. Because what we don't want is to be planting trees in streets, and we've all seen it. We've seen trees be vandalised unnecessarily by residents who don't want them, or because it's taking up verge parking. So we do want to see that wider community involvement in when we're looking to do any tree planting. And critically for us, it's about, you know, we've already spoken about, you know, the litter picking we do with over 1,000 groups, and the pupils we deal with. It's about getting the kids through the tree wardens and our education officer understand the importance of trees. We talked about, you've raised the issue of air pollution. Sheffield's no different to any other city, so it's critical that we increase the tree stock, we increase the education as well around the importance of street trees and the wider urban forests as well. So, you know, getting into the kids is critical, and obviously, you know, Amey staff overall, you know, critical to being ambassadors, getting the trees well maintained, looked after. As I said, we do quite a number of community projects across the city as well. Certainly in schools, you know, often with tarmac playgrounds. We've done one green wall in a school in the urban environment, and we've done another with a small forestry school that we created for them, and some raised planters. So trying to get some greenery into the schools so the kids see it and get more familiar and understand how to maintain it. That was a very quick run through. I thought it was going to be much longer than that, to be fair. So I'm happy to take any questions.
That's fantastic. Darren, thank you so much. There's actually got questions in the chat, if that's okay. So one of the first ones was about Coventry, and I think Chrissy put in the chat that they've had 30 big trees taken down in their precinct in the last 2 years. Chrissy, do you want to just say a little bit about what's happened in Coventry?
Yeah, I don't know when the planning permission went through, because I've only moved into the area in the last few years, but it was horrifying just seeing suddenly the loss of so many large trees. I know they're doing a huge big development in the city centre and just trying to change the perspective of it, but in the process why we had to lose those trees when in the designs of the architects large trees featured. So there should be some large trees there in the end, but how they're going to suddenly appear is yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
We have a similar issue in Sheffield. So if you like, the Street Tree Partnership and the strategy is all focused on the street trees that Amey are responsible for. So we have 36,000 street trees overall, which has been fantastic. But the trouble is the city is changing as well, and it's transforming, particularly after and with COVID, the way people will travel and use the city will be different. So the Street Tree Partnership is quite ambitious in making sure the landscape architects, the planning teams and everyone else also follow the same sort of governance that we're putting in with the partnership around the street trees. So we are seeing now tree wardens being consulted upon in terms of the Transforming Cities programme at the moment. So that will involve providing greater access for cycling and footfall through the city. And as a result, there may well be trees and changes in the city being promoted that may be delivered by Amey or by others and other contractors. But at the very early stages now, Sheffield are going out to consultation, making sure people are aware, and it's about raising that awareness. I don't know when, like I say, the trees were being planned in Coventry, but I think going forward in Sheffield, if anything, any programs like that within the City Council now, they will be promoting the works, and they actually, when they come to the development and changes around the city like that, we are seeing a greater number of trees being replaced. So a 3-for-1 or more program, which is great as well, because obviously Amey is restricted to that 1-for-1. So hopefully you'll see more trees in Coventry than this. But yeah, it'll take them a while to get to that same majestic size, unfortunately.
yeah.
Just,
So maybe, go on, sorry.
I was just to say, just to add in, I mean, like in Birmingham, it's a very difficult decision sometimes when we're undergoing public realm works to make decisions of can we retain the existing trees that we've got. But we have got an example just on the end of Colmore Road where we're undertaking some street works. We had I think it was 4 existing hornbeams that were relatively mature, but they were planted a little bit too close to the buildings, so we're having to constantly prune them back. They weren't in adequate rooting volume, so they were starting to fail. And although they'd still got probably another maybe 10-15 years ahead of them, it's a difficult decision, but we did decide to take those out. But we've then put in about 200 cubic metre tree pit and have replanted it back into that. So the trees that we've put in back are going to have a much longer life expectancy, a much better potential to fulfil the sort of the green side of things than the existing trees that were there. So while we could have retained them, the longer term vision was the thing that we went with on that. But yeah, not easy and not always popular, but there we had the business improvement districts, so we could consult with them, so they were all sort of on board with the longer term vision there.
So it sounds like maybe in Coventry you need to speak to the Sheffield Tree Action Group and get some direct action to force some change within the council. Darren stepping away from.
I'll step away from that one, obviously, but they were very good, as you know.
Yeah. Sometimes it needs the fuss, doesn't it, to get change. I know in Sandwell they're taking up a lot of their trees to put in cycle paths, so their street trees are going because they're putting in cycle paths.
And there are difficult situations. We've got one tree that through the joint inspections we did with Stag, we removed 9 tons of historical asphalt that have been just layered and layered on top of tree defects on the footpath. When we've taken away, you've exposed all the roots. There is no safe passage along that footway now. So we're looking at, do we put a large build out in around it so that people can get around the tree? That's going to take up a number of parking spaces on a very congested street. So that's not likely to be welcomed by the residents. And there's those difficult balances now we've got to look at. So there will be some difficult conversations, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I'm sure there will. There was also, you know, somebody picked up your comment about lime trees. I think certainly in Birmingham, our lime trees seem kind of fairly robust, but you've got an issue with Phytophthora.
We have in a number of our lime trees. Yeah, and it does seem to be each year we are seeing more of it. So I can't remember the specific Phytophthora we're talking about. I'll have to come back to you on that one, Tony. But yeah, no, we're monitoring them, and yeah, we've had to take a couple of them out.
Right. Okay.
Well, don't think we don't have it down here, Tanya, because we do, you know. And Cretcham area is the other one that we have. Yeah, I mean, and that's really quite sort of insignificant to look at, but the impacts of that when it actually gets established, especially on street trees, you know, the potential for catastrophic and sudden failures is yeah, we need to be very careful with that.
So just really important that all of our tree wardens know what to look for Phytophthora and other diseases, isn't it? Somebody's asked about the training that you do for tree wardens. What does that involve?
Yeah, so we've spent quite a lot of time with the partnership and with the City Council developing some guidelines. So you know, when we do tree works, when we won't. So the wardens can educate residents, but also when they look at a tree, whether it particularly would need any work and whether we get involved. So the guidelines are there. Our tree inspectors are meeting them regularly as well in terms of the tree wardens to provide some skills. And to be fair, we're taking a little bit of learning from you, Tanya, and everyone else in Birmingham about the level 2 and offering courses. So we're currently exploring that as well, and how we might join you, I think. So, you know, you're 6 years in, we're a couple of months in. So, yeah, we're looking to learn from you, I think, a little bit on the training.
Fantastic. Somebody's asked about the street tree verges and whether you're encouraging wildflower.
So yeah, because we do have verges as well, we did a Living Highways project a couple of years ago with the Wildlife Trust outside of the tree issues. We employed and worked with the Sheffield University and brought in a PhD case student to look at different mowing regimes and alternatives to the high frequency mowing you see in the urban environment, to see the benefits on biodiversity and also the public perception and public impact that would have. Some people, when we stopped mowing, started mowing the verges themselves. Obviously that was a benefit to us because obviously it saved money. So we were delighted. The overall perception was people liked mown verges outside their houses. The authority were looking for some savings. So actually what we did do is take 20% of the grass verges out of high frequency mowing and put them into an annual cut to try and improve biodiversity. But we didn't do it on the verges outside people's houses. We did it on the gateways and the more arterial routes around the estates, not the urban streets. So that's gone down well, and we have done some minor overseeding of verges for wildflower, which has been very successful. We even put some yellow rattle on a centre reserve, which is parasitic to grass and encourages wildflowers up. So that's been successful. And where we've identified with the Wildlife Trust areas of, you know, sort of old meadows, if you like, or remnants of meadows, we've put them under a different regime as well to encourage wildflowers and orchids and such coming up. So that's been very successful. And because we're raising the level and awareness around trees through the wardens and everyone else, they're wanting actively to get involved in funding wildflower meadows and taking responsibility for verges. So the licensing agreement we're looking at through the community tree funding is also being considered at the moment for wildflower verges as well. So we just got to be a little bit more, it's a little tricky because obviously when you start asking others to go out and mow or collect grass horizons off verges, you've got to be a bit careful, health and safety, and working next to a high-speed road or a road anyway. So yeah, we're looking at it.
I'll just chip in there. I mean, I know there's a few comments in the chat there talking about the wildflower verges and the mowing. I mean, one of the things I'm trying to encourage our highways department to use is like the flowery lawn turf or mix. So for those of you that don't know, if you think about those very low growing species that you'd normally find, so clover, self-heal, bird's foot trefoil, those kind of things, they'll cope with the regular mowing. They'll flower in between mowings as well. So on a sort of standard 4 weekly cut, there's enough time to for them to put some flowers there, so they still provide that pollinator resource, but you don't get the taller, longer grasses that, you know, might impact on visibility displays or then give you issues with the risings when you've got to cut them off on the annual basis. So yeah, lots of things that can be done, yeah, right sort of treatment in the right location, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is, and obviously mindful of cost of them, because obviously budgets are a little squeezed at the moment from most local authorities as well. So again, while we're looking at getting the community involved.
Yeah, okay, that's brilliant. I've also had somebody say about Tu B'Shavat, the Jewish tree festival in January, where there's an onus on people to go and plant a tree. So that might be something we can all incorporate in our group as a good opportunity to engage with people. Somebody's also asked about the litter picking project and what ages of children were you engaging, or were you engaging with children for litter picking?
So yeah, our education officer engages with all the schools, so primary and secondary schools. We try to encourage university students, but I think there's this period of time where you can educate kids to stop dropping litter, and then they go to that period of time where they go to university and Freshers Week particularly, and pizza are giving them boxes full of pizzas. They seem to forget about the litter bin, and you know, the morals seem to drop away a little bit perhaps for a period. But yeah, so we're trying to get to reach the young children. The Sheffield litter pickers, you can find them on the net or on Facebook. They're extremely active, and they're picking litter up from the highway, local woodlands, housing areas and others. And then through us, drop it in a specific location, which we then come and collect. So, because ultimately, they may not be picking all the litter off from the highway, but eventually it ends up being blown onto the highway or coming into the contact with the highway. So, you know, wherever they pick it up from, we come and collect it.
Right, right. Yeah, people seem to be saying that getting into good habits before the age of 11 and as early as possible, definitely.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I'm just having a look. There's quite a lot going on in the chat, but I think it's mainly about litter and wildflowers. So that's certainly hit a bit of a vein with us as well. I wanted to ask, in terms of kind of, I suppose it's what next really, isn't it? So you've got quite a lot going on in Sheffield, but where do you see things going in, say, maybe 5 years' time? What would you like to see?
Well, I think, shall I talk first about the decision-making process, which is going to be launched in the strategy. So traditionally what would happen is Amey inspectors would identify a tree, recommend it to be replaced. That would go to the authority. The authority will either accept or decline it. And if they've approved that replacement, we would notice the tree, and then 2 weeks later we come along and fell the tree and then replace it. The new approach is that we will submit a recommendation to replace a tree to the authority. The authority may accept or decline at that point, but they won't approve. So what will happen now, the tree is actually put up on citizen space, and there's actually one currently going through the consultation now on citizen space. And we have a tree map, so it identifies the tree to be replaced. So there's a questionnaire that people can fill in, whether they're, and it also highlights, you know, what impact that tree has on them, whether they're a local resident, whether they commute along that street, or whether they just have an interest in trees. It highlights the replacement tree that we're proposing for the location as well, so people can feedback on that. And there's also a tree, so like I say, there's a tree map, a consultation on citizen space, and actually on the actual tree itself, there's a tree notice, and we obviously promote that to local residents as well for a letter drop. And there's a QR code on the tree notice, so people can straight away go to that survey online without having to look up links and websites and everything else. So that's open then for an open consultation for 3 weeks. That then is looked at by the authority, and ultimately the authority make the decision whether that tree is replaced or not. And, you know, following that consultation, decision is made by the authority, and then we undertake whatever instruction we get. At the moment, we are only testing it, so you know, please go and find it and try it for yourselves. We hope to get a little bit more challenging trees on there soon, because obviously at the moment we'll just trial it with the dead and the condition fails, which most people who have an interest in trees aren't likely to dispute. They might have some interest in the replacement tree, you know, why we might be planting another cherry rather than diversifying on the species. But have a look, it's good. So hopefully through that, we build a much more transparent process. So a lot of the issues, the historical issues, where it wasn't transparent. What was the damage on the highway? Why can't you spend a couple of thousand to fix the damage? Or is it that severe that you can't leave the curb out? This whole process adds that transparency, I hope. And therefore, what we're seeing in the next 5 years is a real partnership developing, I hope, with ex-members of STAG becoming tree wardens, they have, getting that local engagement. And I hope the tree wardens develop to look a lot more, a much broader depth of the trees than just street trees. I hope the authority take them on much wider into the parks and elsewhere.
It's interesting just hearing you talk about the additionality of your consultation there, and knowing that through the Environment Bill there'll be the change in the Highway Act to mandate the consultation on mandate consultation on street tree removal, but it hasn't set the detail out yet as to just what that will entail. So yeah, in Birmingham, we've done exactly the same thing, obviously because it was Amey. We've put notices on the trees, and it may be that that's sufficient in the government eyes to do that, but it'll be interesting to see how your process works and rolls out. Yeah,
we were heavily involved in DEFRA at the time. Came up, and obviously through Gove and everything else when the dispute was at its peak, looking at the consultation. It's really what we were doing. They've now tried to embed, I think, in the Environmental Bill. I think we've gone one step further now, certainly with citizens and space and that wider.
Yeah. No, I know we had some consultation with DEFRA as well, and there was a whole series of suggestions as to what that might entail. Yeah, so I think the one big thing for us is are we going to get that office of resource if we end up going down that route, or is that passed on to the contractor? Because obviously, we'll be looking for a new PFI probably in the next sort of 18 months, 2 years, I suppose. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got an interesting question in the chat here. So for the local authority, do trees appear as liabilities or assets?
I don't think there's a balance sheet calculation for any local authority in that respect. They are deemed as an asset, and obviously we had 36,000 assets transferred to Amey when we started the PFI, as Birmingham would have transferred their assets to Amey in their PFI. So they are deemed as an asset. I don't think they'll be deemed as a liability in any spreadsheet. The issue is when you try and value them through CAVIT or any other valuation tool, is how you how it becomes a meaningful valuation. How it becomes a meaningful valuation to take forward. It's certainly easy when it comes to development programs and transforming the city, because you can look at that valuation and it can feed into the replacement tree stock and the numbers. It's a little bit difficult when you're just looking at that individual street tree, its valuation, and then what remedial works you might need to do to either retain it or replace it. It does become difficult.
Right, okay. So yes, people just saying about when the trees were lost prior in Sheffield, obviously at that point they were more of a liability than an asset, it may be.
Potentially, I think you got, I don't want to talk too much about the dispute because, but you got to remember, like many cities, Sheffield hadn't invested in its tree stock for many, many years, decades to be fair. And the trouble was we were delivering a core investment period over a 5-year period, and that was looking, I think we were trying to accelerate the tree placements too quick. I think if it was spread over 10, 15 years, it wouldn't have had the impact that it had, but because of the short window we were operating, it was difficult.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Just when you were saying about the Environment Bill, because obviously that sounds like that's going to have massive implications for all of our local authorities, and it sounds like particularly Coventry are going to have to think very carefully about how they operate. What's the timescale for that bill being implemented?
Well, currently it's been delayed going through Parliament. I think it's going back into Parliament in the fall, in the autumn.
Right, okay. So in the meantime, Coventry are just going to have to do even more funerals for their trees and other public events to try and force Coventry City Council to be more...
Yeah, but I think there's, I mean, just as we planning policy, I mean, we've got you know, policy coming through about the use of caveat in planning, and although it hasn't been formally adopted, I know our planning officers still give significant weight to it because it is what we're going to adopt later this year. And I think, you know, knowing that these things are in the Environment Bill, they should really be thinking about giving that weight and giving that consideration to it rather than waiting for it to be mandated. So, you know, I think there's a something to lever with there. You know, say, look, you know, you're going to have to do it. Why not? Let's start looking at it now. Same for biodiversity net gain. You know, that's going to be mandated coming through. So.
Right. Okay. There's another question coming, Darren. It's about rewilding in the urban landscape, but I'm guessing because you're not parks, it's about, do you let trees kind of obviously just kind of self-seed and everything? But I guess Amey doesn't do parks.
We don't do parks. What we do see is some people with like guerrilla gardening on bits of verge that you know, that will allow it to be rewilded. You know, we do work with people in that respect. But yeah, parks, I'm afraid Nathan and others will have to pick up on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's great. Okay. Darren, thank you so much for your presentation, and I think certainly for me, and I'm hoping for the guys in Coventry and maybe other places, we've got a lot of kind of food for thought about things that we need to do. So I guess you might be getting some calls from us on a bit of advice.
I look forward to it. So thank you for inviting me.